There may be a quiet shift taking place in someone's heart, and what makes it so meaningful is that it didn't begin with a dramatic event. It began with an ordinary moment that carried an unexpected feeling. Your soulmate may have been moving through their day exactly as they always do. Nothing appeared different. Responsibilities demanded their attention, conversations came and went, and life seemed to follow its familiar rhythm. But somewhere between those ordinary moments, something unexpected happened. They paused, not because someone told them to, not because they were searching for answers, but because, for reasons they could not immediately explain, they suddenly felt the need to reflect. It wasn't about the past at first. It wasn't even about you. It was simply a quiet feeling that something inside them was asking to be understood instead of ignored. For a long time, they may have believed that moving forward meant staying busy. If they kept their attention on everything outside themselves, they would never have to question the emotions they left unexplored. But life has an interesting way of slowing us down when our hearts are ready to learn something new. As they became still, they may have noticed a memory returning with surprising clarity. It wasn't a perfect memory. It wasn't about grand promises or dramatic moments. It was something simple. Perhaps it was the way they felt understood during a conversation. Perhaps it was the sense of peace they experienced without realizing how rare it was. Or perhaps it was the feeling that, for a brief moment in their life, they didn't have to pretend to be someone else. That realization stayed with them. The more they reflected, the more they recognized that certain memories never disappeared. They simply became quieter. Your connection may have become one of those quiet memories, not forgotten, not erased, simply resting beneath the surface until life created the right moment for it to be noticed again. At first they questioned themselves. Why now? Why would this memory return after so much time? They searched for a logical explanation, yet every answer seemed incomplete. Because what they were experiencing was not only about memory, it was about meaning. Sometimes people do not remember someone because they are unable to move on. Sometimes they remember because that connection became part of who they are. Your soulmate may slowly be realizing that this connection shaped them in ways they never fully appreciated. Perhaps it taught them patience. Perhaps it revealed fears they had never acknowledged. Perhaps it showed them how deeply they were capable of caring, even if they struggled to express it. As these thoughts continue unfolding, another realization may quietly appear. They are no longer asking whether the connection mattered. They are asking why it mattered so deeply. That question changes everything. Instead of focusing on what was lost, they begin paying attention to what was learned. Instead of replaying old disappointments, they begin recognizing how much they have changed since those moments. Growth often begins this way, not through certainty, but through honest reflection. Your soulmate may now understand that emotional strength is not built by avoiding difficult feelings. It is built by facing them with compassion. That understanding is changing the way they see themselves. It is also changing the way they think about every meaningful relationship in their life. They may become more patient, more intentional, more willing to listen instead of assuming, more willing to speak honestly instead of hiding behind silence. These changes may seem small from the outside, yet inside, they represent a completely different way of living. For perhaps the first time, they are beginning to trust that vulnerability is not something to fear. It is simply the willingness to let truth exist without trying to control every outcome. As that awareness grows, they may notice something else. The memories that once brought confusion are now bringing clarity. They are beginning to understand that some connections leave more than memories. They leave wisdom, and perhaps that is the quiet transformation taking place today. Not because the past has returned, not because every answer has suddenly appeared, but because one heart is becoming honest enough to recognize what it once overlooked. Sometimes the greatest change does not begin with a conversation. Sometimes it begins with a single quiet realization that slowly reshapes everything that follows, and perhaps that realization has already begun. As that quiet realization continues to grow, your soulmate may begin noticing something they had overlooked for a very long time. It is not simply that they remember you, it is the way those memories have begun changing. In the past, they may have remembered isolated moments without giving them much meaning. A conversation would briefly cross their mind before disappearing. A familiar place might remind them of another time before life quickly demanded their attention again. Now those same memories feel different. Instead of appearing as random fragments, they seem connected by a deeper emotional truth. They are beginning to recognize that every meaningful memory carries the same quiet feeling beneath it. It is the feeling of authenticity. When they think about those moments, they remember how natural everything seemed. There was no need to force conversations or create a perfect image of themselves. They could simply exist, and that simple experience may now feel far more valuable than they realized at the time. That understanding has encouraged them to reflect on other areas of their life. They may be asking themselves whether they have been living according to what truly matters or whether they have spent too much time chasing expectations that never brought lasting peace. These questions do not arrive with immediate answers. Instead, they invite patience. One reflection leads to another. One realization opens the door to the next. Slowly, they begin seeing patterns that were once hidden. They recognize how often fear encouraged them to delay important conversations. They recognize how easily uncertainty convinced them to remain silent when honesty might have created understanding. Most importantly, they recognize that protecting themselves from disappointment also prevented them from experiencing deeper emotional connection. That realization is difficult, yet it is also freeing. Because once someone understands the pattern, they are no longer completely controlled by it. Your soulmate may now be reaching that point. Instead of asking whether the past can be changed, they are asking what kind of person they want to become moving forward. That question has quietly become more important than any single memory. The answer is beginning to shape their choices. They may become more intentional with the people they allow into their life, more careful with promises, more appreciative of genuine conversations, more willing to express gratitude while the opportunity still exists. People around them may notice subtle changes without understanding where they came from. They may seem calmer during situations that once created stress. They may become more thoughtful before responding. They may no longer feel the need to prove themselves in every conversation. Real emotional growth often appears this way. It is rarely dramatic. It quietly changes the way a person experiences ordinary life. Perhaps that is exactly what is happening now. As they continue reflecting, they may also realize something unexpected. The connection they once viewed as a finished chapter no longer feels defined by endings. Instead, it feels defined by lessons. Lessons about trust, lessons about courage, lessons about timing, lessons about the importance of speaking honestly before silence becomes a habit. They are beginning to understand that meaningful connections are not measured only by how long they lasted. Sometimes they are measured by how deeply they change the people involved. That perspective brings peace, not because every unanswered question suddenly disappears, but because they are no longer trying to escape what they genuinely feel. Acceptance begins replacing resistance. Compassion begins replacing self-criticism. Hope quietly replaces fear. This inner transformation does not guarantee that life will unfold in a particular way. Instead, it prepares them to meet whatever comes next with greater wisdom than before. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of this journey. Not certainty, but readiness. Readiness to communicate with honesty. Readiness to appreciate meaningful moments while they are happening. Readiness to choose openness instead of emotional distance. If another important opportunity ever appears, they may no longer approach it with the same habits that once held them back. Not because they expect perfection, but because they now understand that honesty creates a kind of peace that avoidance never could. And whether life brings familiar faces or entirely new chapters, that lesson will remain with them. It has become part of who they are. Sometimes the heart does not change in a single moment. It changes through many quiet realizations that slowly become impossible to ignore. Perhaps that is the true meaning of everything they have been experiencing. The memories were never asking them to remain in the past. They were inviting them to become more authentic in the present. And as they continue walking that path, they may discover that the future is no longer something to fear. It is simply another opportunity to live with greater honesty, deeper compassion, and a heart that no longer hides from what truly matters. That is the quiet transformation now unfolding within them. And sometimes, the most meaningful beginnings arrive so gently that they are only recognized after they have already changed everything.